Now we're going to take a little look into the science of writing your resume, the science of reading, really, and how you can structure or write your resume to get the most impact. Because remember, we've only got a very short amount of time to make our point. But before we move into that, let's go ahead and do a real quick review. Remember that you're a teacher. Your job in creating this resume is to teach and instruct the hiring manager, the recruiter, whoever it is that is looking at your resume about what you're capable of. You're not going to tell any lies at all, ever, in your entire resume. You've only got a few seconds to make that impact. So now we know all this stuff. Are we ready to sit down and write? Not quite yet. And the reason is we want to know how people are actually going to be reading and going through our resume. This is a very important thing that we have to deal with here. And there is actually a lot of studies that break down how people behave when they sit down to read something. And if we can take that information and we can apply it to the document that we're going to create with this resume, then we can maximize the possibility of us, being able to get that interview, because the things that are on our resume actually end up getting read. Now, all of our resume, most of the time, is not going to get read. And it's sad but true. And I know you're going to spend all kinds of time, structuring this, but it's really not going to happen. So, we have to take and create or structure the resume so that the most important things, we try to make sure that at least those get read. Now, once it ends up, just before an interview is actually conducted, it's a very good possibility that, the resume does get read in its entirety, especially by HR staff. But at that point, you've already jumped through a whole bunch of hoops. The resume has, at least, and it's made it through the 10-second scan and the 30-second scan, and now, it's down to you actually getting an interview. But a lot of the resumes, most of them, get weeded out way before that because they weren't structured in the right way to make that impact when they only had that 10 seconds to do it. So let's take a look at reading as a science. Fixations, these little movements that your eyes go through, and you'll notice as you read the screen right now, as you read that bullet point, your eye doesn't really have a fluid motion. Okay, it skips around from point to point. That's how we read. So a fixation is a brief movement of the eye, and it jumps from one spot to the next. You might read 3 or 4 words per fixation. So every time your eye moves a little bit, you read some words and then you move again. What's that based on, the 3 or 4 words? It's based on how complicated the words are. If the words are very complicated, if the structure and the reading is difficult, then we might just read 1 word per fixation. So simple reading means we get to read more words per fixation. And each one of those fixations takes up about 1/4 of a second. So here's what we are faced with. We can structure our resume because of the averages that people are able to read. We can structure our resume to allow for more words to be read in the same amount of time, or we can make it where less words are read because it's difficult. Which one do we want to do? Well, of course, we want to get more words read. 200 to 1,000 words per minute is average, and that depends on that reading difficulty. If the words are complex, if the structure is difficult. So easier reading sentences will get more read, right, in the same amount of time. And remember, how long do you have when they do the 10-second scan? 10 seconds, right? 10 to 15 seconds. So in that 10 seconds, they're going to read either 20 or 100 words. That's based on being able to read either 200 or 1,000 words per minute. Which would you rather them do? You want to give them as many words as possible, right? Well, if your resume is difficult to read, then you totally just limited yourself. You cut off the potential because you made it so complex that they could only digest 20 words in that 10 to 15 seconds. That's a bad idea, right? You want to give them 20 words or you want to give them 100 words. You can say 5 times as much if you structure things where it's easy for them to read. So you have to be able to take into account what it is that you want to say and relate it to them very, very quickly with the most impact. Let's talk about maximum impact. Short words equal more comprehension. Long words equal low comprehension. Except for the word comprehension, which obviously you know what that means. Right? Well, no, seriously, in your resume, shorter words are a lot easier for people to understand and actually, go down to a depth. So if you use shorter words, they're going to be able to read more. Like, for example, short words, that phrase right there, takes up less space than comprehension. So if I'm talking about those fixations jumping around, well, somebody could fixate on short and read words at the same time. That's 2 words. They could even do a third one there, possibly, depending on what the word is. But the word comprehension, that might have to get read with 1 fixation. So that wastes, the ability to download into their brain some more information at 1 fixation. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Short blocks of text, that's again more comprehension. Long blocks of text, low comprehension. These big chunks of text, they do nothing but discourage people. They come up to it, and seriously, no more than 4 lines in a block of text. 3 is even better. But if you go to 5, most of the time when the eye meets that, the brain's going to go, you know what? I don't really have time for this right now. Let's move on to something else. And that can be detrimental to you, especially if there was something very, very critical about, your abilities, and you make the text, you would squeeze so much in there, right, that you make it 5 lines, and then they skip right over it and don't read it. And that's the fact, folks. These people are really busy, and they don't have time to go through a whole bunch of stuff. So, their whole mentality is, I want to, as much as possible, get through these resumes and find the candidates, that I might be interested in. So they're by no means looking for excuses to read more. For maximum impact with lasting impression, what do you want to do? You want to keep things simple. Don't make it elaborate. Don't go for any outlandish designs or layouts. And don't try to impress them with an incredible vocabulary. Keep it simple, and that's going to actually relate the information in such a way that it makes an impact. Okay, if I'm a teacher, I can relate some, if I have high school students, I might be competent enough to teach to college level students. I might be able to teach a graduate class. I might be able to deal with, even give a lecture to my peers. If, however, I can't bring it down to a high school level, then I can't teach a high school student, because I'm going to be relating stuff to them that is not going to make a lasting impression. In other words, they won't actually learn. I could be telling them great information, and someday when they get to that level, fantastic. But when they're a high school student, they can't handle it. So you've got to be able to break it down to their level. Remember that the hiring manager's ultimate goal is to weed out resumes. That's also goes for the recruiter or the HR personnel. They're not looking for an excuse to add one more resume to the interview list. They want as few as possible because remember, interviews, face-to-face interviews, cost money. Start out strong, because if you're strong right out of the gate, that makes a first impression, and they're going to assume that you're going to be strong throughout. And that is actually, that's a great way to take advantage of their assumptions. If you start out real strong and they're like, okay, you got my attention, even if they don't read the rest of the resume, they've probably read enough that they decide to go ahead and put you in the stack to keep. It's kind of like when you maybe you're going out to buy a new house, right? And you pull up on the drive and the house looks great. Okay, so first impression, you're pretty happy. If you pull up and the house looks kind of run down and shabby, you're not going to go, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and pull up anyways and go inside. Maybe the kitchen's nice. Right? You're not going to be interested because it was a turnoff from the initial get-go from far away. Your resume is the same thing. It's got to make a strong impression right up front. They're going to judge you and your resume based on that initial appearance. And by appearance, I'm talking about not even reading stuff that's on the resume. Just when they look at it, how is it laid out? Does it seem like all the text is jumbled together in these big, humongous, honking paragraphs that my mind doesn't even want to deal with right now? Or is it laid out in such a way that makes it real simple for me to, I can look at stuff and at a